Okay, our next video is about double periods. Double periods are 4 phrases, not 2 phrases, but 4. And they have kind of a more complex structure than the periods. So we're going to look at this 4-phrase piece or section, and it's already marked off for you. This is page 159 in your book. And I'll show you what a double period is like. So, by the way, you're going to be drawing a diagram in your homework like is here at the bottom of the page. I'll show you in just a minute. But let's take a look at this. This is a very famous Beethoven piano sonata. So as I'm doing this, we want to look at the phrases, mark the cadences. That's the first thing. Once you've marked the cadences, which is already done here for you, obviously, look at the melodies. And we need to give the melodies a label. A is the first one, obviously. The next one, if it's different, we call it B. If it's not different, if it's kind of the same, if the cadences are the same, we give it the same letter. It'd be A and A. If the cadence is different, we call it A and A prime. And I'll show you that. You'll see an example in just a minute. So, this little theme, da 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 da. That's how that goes. So 1, 2, 3, 4. It shows you it ends on a half cadence, so we know that the first phrase, you can look down here at the bottom, they've marked it for you. It's A, because that's always the first one, ends on a half cadence. Okay? And then second phrase, da 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 dee da da, obviously different from the first one. So this is definitely going to be called B. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Look at that. It ends on a 5 chord, also a half cadence. So we look down here, you can see how they've marked it half cadence. B, like we said, same different melody, got the 2 same cadences. So that's phrase 2. Phrase 3, if you compare 3 and 1, 3 and 1 will often be similar. It looks very different. However, it's very similar, just kind of ornamented a little bit. Well, let's look at the cadence. We finished those 4 bars, ends on a cadence. Look at that, ends on a half cadence. So, our third phrase, it's half cadence again, so we have half, half, half. Notice that it's A. Even though the melody looked a little bit different, had a few extra notes, the cadence is the same. The melody reminds you of it. That's when we call it A and A again. Since the cadence is the same, we just call it A. We don't call it A prime. We would only call it prime with a little line there if the cadence was different. Okay. Finally, we look at the fourth phrase. Da, 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 dee, da, da. That's very similar to the second phrase, B. Take a look at it there. It tells you the cadence. 5, 1, it's a pack. So it is a different cadence. See, those 2 were B's, right? It's a different cadence. So B and B, the melodies sound the same, but the cadence is different, so we call it B prime. Okay, now, if you look at this, we've got A and B prime. In order to decide if this is a parallel double period, we look at the second cadence, and you've got a handout that explains step by step how to do this. 2 phrases here and 2 phrases here. Second phrase is a half cadence. Because that is a half cadence there, we call it a double period. In other words, it's kind of a double structure, right? See how it, in the big picture here, if we just ignore those 2 cadences, that looks like a period, half cadence followed by a PAC. That would look like a big period, but since we have 2 phrases, that's why it's called double. Now, there's also a possibility if this cadence right here matched this cadence. If this was a PAC and this was a PAC, it can't be a double period. We would call it a repeated period. In other words, if this cadence and this cadence were the same, and then these 2 are already the same, it's like a period that's repeated. So we call it a repeated period. In this case, it's not, it's double, but it could be repeated. Finally, this last word, see that parallel right there? We need to look at this period and decide, are the melodies parallel, are they the same, or are they contrasting? It's either a parallel double period or a contrasting double period. And what you look at are the first and the third phrase. Those are the melodies, right? So double period, first and third. You compare those two, they're the same. We call it parallel because they start the same. Now, if we had a contrasting period, you wouldn't compare these two, right? Because, I'm sorry, a repeated period, not double. If it were a repeated period, it would be a period that was repeated, so obviously they'd be the same. So if this were a repeated period, then we would compare the first two. Okay? So that's exactly how that works. And I'm going to do one more example for you, and you'll see it in the video how this works. It's a little bit confusing. I have a handout that I gave you on Moodle, and you can use those steps to decide how to do it. It's a step-by-step way to do it. So it just takes a little practice.